before a couple of weeks ago, I had never heard of the Nisenan people. Why have I never heard of these people?
Up to just a couple of years ago, we were considered extinct. So there weren't a whole lot of people talking about the Nisenan up here at Nevada County. We originally had a rancheria federally recognized, which is just up on Cement Hill. And in fact, in our membership, in our tribe, we have people still that were born on the rancheria. That hasn't been a big part of history in Nevada County, the local history, and probably because, like you, many people didn't think about it or hear about it. But we decided to come out and be a little more verbal because it was just needed at the time.
Why were you considered extinct?
We were probably considered extinct because none of us were out talking and saying we're Indian. You know, there was no reason. You don't go out saying I'm an Indian and that type of thing. So until we had a cause to go out and say, no, we are indigenous to here, that it just didn't get out there much due to our own membership, our fault.
So, describe for me, starting with the name of your tribe. How extensive are you? How many people over what area?
Well, we are also at this time we're trying for federal recognition again, to be reinstored our federal recognition, and so we've gathered up, our tribe and the people involved, and we probably have about maybe up to 150 members. Our membership is all within a 33-mile radius. So, we're doing a lot of work federally trying to get it, re-recognized.
On you and your life and your parents and grandparents and what you remember.
Okay, briefly going through my past life, what I remember. It's funny, sitting here with the sound of the river or the creek and the smell takes me back immediately. It's funny how smells and sounds never go away. But we actually lived on the creek when I was about, 8, 7, in that area. We lived right off Deer Creek here. But anyway, Deer Creek's really important to our family because it goes all the way back. And a lot of my memories are through my father, who would be over 100 now. But, he had little stories. He wasn't really willing to talk about a lot of stuff that happened. And I kind of think of that in terms of my daughter's other grandfather who went through World War II. He could never talk about it. And I think we find that with a lot of people who've been through real traumatic experiences. And with my father, it took us being adults and him being much older before he even started, other than comments and different things. It was a real painful time at the gold rush and beyond. Before that, of course, was a whole different story. And he told us, because he had stories of his parents and things, and that was before the gold rush. And it was a whole different life, and my mother will attest to this too. And her favorite saying is, everybody wants to know about the Indians and they think it's a great way to live, but I would like to see one of them live 6 months in our life. She said the people now probably would not survive it. And with her, she was 14, taking care of an elderly woman. Her parents had died off. She was an orphan. And she took care of an elderly woman. But at 14, with a little pistol on her hip, she walked into the river and she made their living gold panning, by herself. And so she has quite a history, I remember growing up without a house. We lived out in the woods, I wouldn't trade it now for anything, but I think back on my mom raising us girls out there, and no hospitals or doctors or anything was even in the picture, no vehicle, just out. And I couldn't do it, I don't think, But anyway, even up to that point of me being a small child, life was really tough for Indians. And so they didn't pass a lot of stuff on, but you felt it and you knew it. My father did not trust the government because they had been taken out of their areas and sent to Indian schools where they would fight and run away and try to get back home. Their oldest brother took all of the children and they lived down on the Yuba, literally. And there's one story that's just great I always hang on to. Uncle Lewis was just a baby. And so my Uncle Dan, who was the oldest that had taken the kids down there, they stole a cow and they tied Uncle Lewis to its back so it stayed warm, it had constant movement, and they could milk the cow and feed him and travel the river, without having to carry him. But that's just a glimpse into what very young kids went through, My grandfather had been taken away and put in prison and accused of murder. He spent 10 years there and then was acquitted and released because they found out he was innocent. And, it was a tough time, a real tough time. With the rancheria up here, many of the people stayed there. They went between Wildwood and up here all the time. They had areas. We only found my father on one census. That's how good they were at hiding from the authority of any kind.
So were you brought up to believe that you shouldn't let people know that you were Indian?
Well, we were never told that. Never told that. And it was always proud to be. But it was not. At the same time, I don't know many Indian people that go around tooting their own horn that I know of, that out of our tribe. I mean, I don't even know the word for it, but you just don't go out and, I'm Indian and that's what I do, that just isn't done. But I think maybe from just getting the stories of hearing the older people talking back and forth and little kids always overhearing because we were always there, you heard the stories about they could take you away to an Indian school, they could do this or that. The one thing my father told me, and I was an adult when he told me this, and it was when everybody was coming up and they were trying to get people to join into different reservations like Moortown and Enterprise and all the ones that have sprouted up. And he told us, he said, you don't want to get involved. He said, the government can do anything at any time and there's nothing you can do about it. And he said, I would prefer that you girls don't get involved. And he was afraid for us, that's all. But it was, he was a wonderful man. Just probably the kindest, most intelligent man I've ever known in my life. And that wasn't just because he was my father, it's because he was a good listener. He always kept track on all of the people, the relatives, the membership. He was the one, that he was kind of like the line. And my sister Bertie does that to a point today, which I find pretty interesting, So there's always a few in the family here or there that keep in touch.
So what is your personal connection to Deer Creek? What does Deer Creek mean
Oh,
to you?
geez. It's just always been here. I mean, I identify
because
with it.
My question isn't going to be on here. Instead of saying
Oh, that's right.
I
Yeah.
need you to say Deer Creek.
Deer Creek means a whole lot because our history is here. It's just always been in the mix. Maybe it was a focal point when other people from other tribes were coming in, or we meet at Deer Creek, whatever. But it's just always been there. It's very important. So.
You'd said something earlier, and I'm not sure if I got this right, so I'd love you to kind of restate it for me, about being a tribelet, and how that related to the definition of your tribe was the definition of the land?
Well, no, the boundaries were the definition of the land. It may go to a river or a mountain or this or that, but there were. What I find, and my daughter is the one really to talk because she's done an extensive study in this, and then connecting that with the stories that the elders have told us, and we're now telling her, there were definite boundaries, there was trade, definite language differences, even though they're only 35 miles apart or 30. There were, you knew what tribe you were by your language. And it's like here, the Nisenan, Nevada City, speak just a little differently than Auburn Nisenan. And also, when you go over onto the Dobbins side, there's no county lines in, a little bit different over there. And
What what do people not know about the Nisenan that they should know?
right now with that, I'm doing that again. I think that people should know about the Nisenan, that we're still here, that we haven't changed all that much, that we've been pretty quiet up to this point, that it's difficult to go out because whenever you speak about your tribe or about yourself, you're not speaking just for yourself. You're speaking for your elders. You're speaking from respect. You need to remember, your elders, your relatives, everybody. So you never speak alone. When you speak and you give an answer, you're talking for many people. And we want people to know now that we're not extinct. We're here. We'd like them to know about some of the people in our past who need to be remembered, our ancestors. And there were several that were, that need recognition for our generations to come after us.
Can you give an example of that, and who that ancestor is that you hold most dear, and what that means to you?
Well, I do my father, and I do his father, because I know some of the daily trials that they went through. There are stories of things that had happened, and they rose above that and still maintained I never heard my father say one bad thing about someone. Never. He never ever talked anyone down. And I would ask him questions, as a kid. And he told me that everybody was born equal. Everyone was born equal. Only they could lower themselves in society. And he said that's not a whole race, that's only the person. And if the person lowers themselves, then they're not equal. And that kind of explains to me, how I feel I and maybe my daughter and my family, look at life, is that you don't go judging. And that was a big thing with him. You didn't judge. And, you needed to know the facts about what you were talking about, or you didn't say anything.
Do you have a favorite story that your father, grandfather, mother, grandmother told?
I have some. The one with Uncle Lewis being tied to the cow I thought was pretty good. My father's mother, we lived at the time, because they moved around to work. They were, always working somewhere. But she would walk from Lake Francis down into Dobbins to the store. And there was a mountain lion that always joined her, that always walked behind her and then sat up on the hill, and she got her things. And sometimes she rode the horse because she had horses, but the lion was always behind her. And many people talked about that when I was young, so I remember it. And I always loved that because I love animals. So that was a story I always liked.
Now, you've said a couple of times that your father went through a lot of hard times, but didn't really talk about those hard times until you were both adults.
So he has all of us girls, and he didn't really discuss that stuff until we were older, and if we ask. And we never, right now when we're talking to each other, we scold each other because we didn't question enough. Sometimes you're just too young to even think beyond yourself, And my younger sister, Lorena, used to take him visiting all the time. And she couldn't remember exactly where they were, but it was probably coming out of Browns Valley toward Dobbins. And he pointed, or between here and wherever, she couldn't remember. But he pointed to that mountain, and he said, "You see that mountain?" And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "That's Lou's Mountain." And she said, "Named after your father?" And he said, "Yes." And she goes, "Oh, neat." Yeah, hey, you didn't ask him why, And so, of course, because she didn't ask, he didn't elaborate, because you don't elaborate unless someone wants to
Is
know.
there a specific story you're comfortable telling, and I don't want you to say anything you're not comfortable telling about the harder times in his life?
Well,
Celebrate the time on the coast
on the coast.
when they were doing the shingles. Your grandma was pregnant.
Okay, my mom was pregnant with my sister Lorena. We were living out in the middle of the woods. They went there for work. My mom was about a month away from giving birth, and they got a job for hand cutting shingles for this small company who brought up 2 flatbed trucks, and my mom and dad worked almost 24 hours a day. My sister Bertie took care of me. I was little, and so on and so forth. And we were so happy because we had no money. And we lived out in the woods with no money. I mean, my mom knew what to pick and what to eat and, stuff like that. We literally lived off the land. And sometimes those got, depending on the season. But anyway, they were so happy because this was going to happen. They were going to be able to come down into town, and my mom would be close to a hospital. And the people took off in the middle of the night and left with all the shingles in the trucks. But that was just, something that you almost expected.
Why almost expected?
Well, it just seemed like that type of thing happened to the people a lot. My dad's uncle was really happy, and he found a nugget, a good-sized nugget. And so on his way home, he went into the local tavern, which is one of the only places that was, you could go in and sit down. And anyway, he showed it, and a bunch of guys cut his throat and took the nugget. And somebody drug him up to the house, and my mom doctored him. I mean, she delivered all the kids around there and did stitches in people who were bleeding. I mean, she literally, with no training, just out of necessity. But that kind of stuff. My grandfather going to prison when he was innocent. My grandmother being hauled into a mental institution just because she was kind of in the way at the time of something they wanted to move forward with. And it's just something that happened pretty periodically. And it was worse than that before, but, it...
How do you move past that?
I think another thing my dad probably instilled a lot of, and my mom too, I don't know. Maybe I would be more bitter than they were, but they're not. And my dad was never bitter. He didn't say horrible things to people. He always trusted. He always, wanted to give the benefit of the doubt, would help anybody. I saw days when we had next to nothing, and he would share our next to nothing with someone that had less. And that was just kind of a way of life. My mom's still like that. She'd give you the shirt off her back. And it's just, I don't know if that was a total Native American type, Indian type of a personality. I don't know, but I know many people like that in our tribe, and so
That's
yeah,
really something to be proud of.
I think so. Yeah, I look at them. I'll tell you, my mom and dad. When you say who would I talk about, that deserves a little bit of something written, is them, because they were above and beyond most of the time. I mean, and I look back and I don't know if I would have the stamina to do what they did. I just don't know. Maybe, but maybe not.
So how does all of this relate to the Deer Creek Tribute Trail?
Oh, that was, again, like I started to say earlier, when we first started kind of talking, and they were dedicating that to another group that wasn't from here, and it was not true. And I have a real hard time dealing with, that's one thing my dad never tolerated. You didn't lie. That's something you just don't do. And stealing and lying was worse than murder. That was the two things. Those were the bad things. And not that he ever gave us permission to murder anybody, but they were not being truthful, and that was hard. And they were also Indian people, which there's kind of you don't go on someone else's land and claim it.
But now that you have spoken the truth and announced
Yes.
yourselves as,
Yes,
as
and
being
but
here.
that all has to do with Deer Creek, you see, because that was the first place we went to say, this is not the truth. And, we don't care who you dedicate it to. That's totally up to you. All we're saying is be truthful to the people of Nevada County. And if you're dedicating it to them, go right ahead. Just put dedicated to them from Plumas County, because that's the truth. And that's where we all got started, and we just started getting more and more involved, which is really good because, there was a barrier. There was a barrier where you didn't talk about things, and you didn't want to bring up something that may cause someone embarrassment or shame or whatever. And I think what I'm saying here is that when starting with Deer Creek and them saying, well, do this and help us out with this, and let's make the signs, let's get the information on the trail, all of that has just escalated into a whole lot of history research. We pulled out all of the things that we know in our family that my dad told us. We've done the research, and every single thing has been true. Every single thing that we've looked into that he had said was true. And we have documentation to prove it. So that's the thing.
Great. Yeah.
I swam in Deer Creek probably as early as the very early 50s, and I'm not exactly what date, but I think we even fished in there later. Then I heard you shouldn't eat the fish out of there. That was much later. But yeah, it was probably earlier than that. I probably don't even remember when I first went to Deer Creek. Actually, my memories of Deer Creek, my first one is very vivid because my older sister, Bertie, I couldn't swim. So she took me up the creek in the deep water and pushed me off of the inner tube and said, sink or swim. And I swam. So I remember that day quite well. But we swam in Deer Creek a lot. There were fish in it at that time. It was not near as grown. That was one of my impressions looking at the creek today. It's so overgrown compared to what it was or what I remember. And there were no buildings. None of this was here. And I think where we lived was the last residential spot on the creek side. So all of this is new. So we, of course, from there would come up and down the creek with no one, to bother us. And it was good. It was like being in the wilds, even this far out of town.
So if I'm hearing you right, when you were a kid, this just felt like your land.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Can you restate that in your own words?
When we were little and living here on Deer Creek, we could go up and down the creek. I mean, we made forts, all of the stuff that you do as kids. We swam a lot. There was, like I said, there was fish. Sometimes we caught the little bitty ones and took them home and tried to raise them. But it just felt at home. I mean, that's all. It just, now you get the feeling that you're on someone else's property, and that's probably the hard part about being in Nevada County and having everything fenced and it's private and that type of thing. And we are so lucky to have access here on this beautiful spot to our memories right there, and that's all to the goodness of the person that owns his property. So that's a really biggie. And that's another thing that we have found by getting involved with Deer Creek Institute and all that stuff, doing Friends of. I'm not used to their new name yet. But anyway, getting used to going out and talking to different people and letting them know who we are. This county has just opened up their arms, and it's been great. I mean, the people that now own the land on our old reservation has invited us to come up if we want to go in and get plants. They've invited us up if we want to just go sit on the land. That's big. That's really big, and we've found a lot of that coming true lately. So that's nice.
That's great. Is that
Great.